All right, well, we're gonna give this. I got a bunch of painting to get done, and I thought it'd be interesting to do it live. So I got a few pieces to work on, and technical difficulties. Lots of technical difficulties. Still getting used to everything. Oh, there we go. All right, so hey folks, well, Big D here, and we're just gonna be painting on some minis. But I've had people ask me about how I do certain things and how I do certain techniques and my process. So I'm no master painter, but I put together a pretty good table side setup. So when I try to batch paint, I try to work in a single color and work across a large number of the batch at once. So I've got 5 Hellblasters here, and I've already finished all the base colors. So I've now got them mounted onto their bases because I don't need to worry about lower on their feet. And so now it's just a matter of getting their shoulder pads and whatnot done. So I got a group of 5 Hellblasters and a group of 5 Intercessors. So we're going to take some Haviland Sunset and start getting 2 thin coats, get these shoulder pads to a nice point. I thought one of the nice things with this new camera would be the functionality of being able to live stream either when I'm painting or when I'm doing builds. So one of the things I may end up doing is if I overpaint on the orange, I'll go back with some Fenrisian gray and re-highlight the shoulder pads. I'm a big fan of painting plinths, but instead of permanently mounting, I'll usually either drill the feet and put them on wire, and then I've got these wonderful foam tubes I do that I'll put on a washer, and I've got pill bottles with magnets ends that I can stick them to. Or I actually got washers in the bottoms of my figures, so that once they're beyond the first part of the base coat, or the main primary portion is done, where I feel comfortable mounting them to their base, is that with the painting base, or the painting plinths I've made. I like having the washers in the bottoms of the figures for weight. A lot of that, I guess, really comes from my early days playing. Where a majority of the figures we played with were metal. And I just got to like the weight. And I found when plastic figures started coming out, I found them to be too light. And they'd often get kicked around on the board, or they'd tip over. They just felt light. Maybe just a observation based on bias, but they felt light. So one of the things I did was I started weighting the bases. Now, when they were still early on, and they were the itty bitty, the beaky Marines, or before that I was playing still Warhammer Fantasy, and I played elves, playing my archers. I would use old aspirin bottles or whatnot and just two-way tape them on there. But I would often weight the figure even then when they first went to plastic. When they went to metal, they didn't need to. It was harder painting stuff. Used a lot of two-way tape back then. It's funny, had I thought about it back then, I probably would have used a lot more poster tack, or you call it blue tack, I guess. I'd have used a lot more back then on plinths. I just never thought of it. But since I could get my hands on tons of the foam two-way tape, I got used to using that. I also, in the early days, didn't worry so much about my bases. There were plenty of base that I would paint, and would simply do nothing more than just paint it completely black and just have them on that nice black, solid black base. Primaris Lieutenant, out of No No Fear. I swapped out the shoulder pad for a Space Wolf shoulder pad. I've loved the Space Wolves since I first got them. Actually, it's the Space Wolves that got me into Warhammer 40K. I was playing Warhammer Fantasy and had been for a bit. And my roommates and I had really kind of fallen for the whole fantasy setting. Blood Bowl was actually, when it came out, became a huge rage. We played it all the time. We had a couple leagues going. It's funny, when I was showing one of my old friends the fact that I got back into painting after being away for so long, he wanted to know where my teams were, because I was kind of known where everybody else just kind of had the basic figures, and maybe if we were lucky, they'd taken a rattle can and just prime them a single color and maybe slapdash some paint on them. I actually bothered. Back in those early days, it was all about just playing the game, and I didn't really nobody worried about too much about how good the paint jobs were, but I did. I was big. It was a big deal. And it seemed like every other paycheck, I was buying another Blood Bowl team because I had an idea for a uniform. I had a Chaos team called the Hollywood Pleasures of the Flesh that were a Slaaneshi color back in the days when Slaaneshi's colors were just pastels. So I had them all in these ridiculous pearlescent pastels you get from Ral Partha. And then I had my Duke of Cyclones. There's a dwarven team that threw to halfling catchers. And that was a hilarious team. Especially when you started running halflings around with chainsaws. I loved those old metal halfling figures. They were just hilarious. There's one of them that didn't have a helmet, so he was just running around with a cook pot on his head. Basically, an old-fashioned cast iron pot. The Tsuga Cyclones. I played them for a couple seasons. They were one of the teams I was best known for because they were just a really competitive team. Nobody really expected them to be, and they were just devastating. And I had my Boot Hill Death Jesters before Death Jesters really became a thing with the Harlequins. So they were a skeleton team, and I used a bunch of these Old West figures I found and replace part of them with parts of the GW Skeleton Horde. One of their first plastic kits. So I have this cowboy theme, this ridiculous cowboy themed team. I was kind of hoping to see a few people pop in. But regardless, we're cracking on. I'm going to let those yellow side dry. And I got to keep them straight because I have to check against their arms. Because the Hellblasters, these two intercessors. It is crazy how these Hellblasters, one of the bad things about Primaris, they don't really look all that different from each other. So I know you're a Hellblaster. No, make it work. So 4 intercessors. Intercessor 1 and Intercessor 2, they don't have shoulder plates. So that's these two guys. We only got 2 intercessors with shoulders. All right. These guys are getting Mephiston red. I'll be honest, as a Space Wolf player, I wasn't sure if I was going to really like Primaris. I was very close to not building my Marines as Primaris. I mean, not as Space Wolves. And actually changing my chapter that I normally play. I figured, you know, I haven't played since the early 90s, so It wouldn't be that big a deal. But then my wife pointed out to me that one of the real big reasons I wanted to get back into this game, and again, the whole reason I started playing 40K to begin with, was because of how much I love the Space Wolves. I mean, they're freaking space Vikings. What's not to love? And like I said, they were what got me to keep from playing Warhammer Fantasy. I've been playing Warhammer Fantasy, and I really didn't. I had this fairly large Elven army at the time. Basically, a few units of Elven cavalry, a metric boatload of high elf archers, and spearmen. Absolute, just god awful amount of them. And then after that, I also had some skirmishers. I remember because they had a bunch of. I kept one of them for the longest time, so I love the paint job I did on it. But they basically were a bunch of elves in studded armor, wielding axes and other, brutal-looking weapons with shields. And again, I don't remember the rules on them anymore, but I remember they were really great because they moved so fast and they could tie up really big units. But anyway, I've been playing Warhammer Fantasy for a few months after I got back from Desert Storm. I didn't actually fight in the war. I was stationed in Germany at the time. But I came back, and we started playing. And we started playing Blood Bowl. It was a lot of fun. And then I'd gone to the store, and we had seen Rogue Trader. We'd seen some of the figures. I'm like, oh, they're pretty cool. Space Marines, that's pretty cool, But we weren't 100% sold on it. We were really, I gotta get some of my paint. We were really, really liking playing fantasy. And then I went into this store, and it's closed now. It's a shame. It was a icon of a spot here in Milwaukee called Napoleon's. And I went in there, Saturday afternoon after getting paid, with the intent of picking up something. I didn't know what, but I was going to get something that day. And I went into the store. And Fritz, the owner, had this brand new book. He pulls it out and he shows it to me. He's like, take a look at this. And it's this book about a type of a space marine but instead of being these regimented by the book boys in blue armor that was all over the iconography of the game, it's a group of these space Vikings. Front cover had guys with long hair and beards covered in runes, and I fell in love reading that book. All right, then and there, I bought that book. I bought the box that he had on the counter for the game. That was that second edition box set, just called Warhammer 40K. They had like 30 Marines in it, and 30 orcs, and the original rule book, which was not even as big as the Codex, really. I bought the Codex and I bought that rule book. I went home and I'm like, yeah, that's the new game. That's what we're going to be playing now. And the roommate that had gotten me into 40K I was like, you know, that game's never going to take off. They're already on a second edition, and the first edition was a mess, and they haven't really gone anywhere, and it's basically just fantasy with guns. It's not really all that much fun. And I'm like, have you played it? And he's like, I tried it at Gen Con, and it wasn't all that. And I'm like, well, I'm painting these guys up like these wolves here, and this is going to be playing. And my roommate at the time, another roommate, really liked the orcs. So we primed them up and we started to paint them, but we never really got far with them. Because he didn't want to paint them, and I was too busy trying to mess with my orcs. Mess with my space wolves. And I moved to a different apartment, and so things got moved around. But my first roommate who had gotten me into the game, who got me into fantasy, he was like, well, if you're not going to play anymore, I'll buy that Elven army off you. And I sold him the Elven army for what I had paid for the pieces, except, you know, now he had a fully painted Elven army. And he's like, what are you going to do when you come back? And I'm like, oh, if I do come back, I'll pick a new faction. Just getting kind of bored of playing the elves. Besides, that Realm of Chaos book is pretty cool. Maybe I'll get some of them demonettes and Keeper's Secrets, and maybe I'll play those Slaaneshi guys. Well, I ended up buying the demonettes, and I bought the Slaaneshi guys, and I bought a bunch of Chaos Marines, and I played them in 40K. Now, pause here for a minute to just point out what I'm doing. Hellblasters are a heavy support unit. So their shoulder pads are in the Codex white with black pack markings. So the 5 Hellblasters, I'm painting their shoulder pads white. The Intercessors are a melee close combat unit, so that's why they got the red. Now you'll notice here I've also got these Infiltrators. The Infiltrators are supposed to be gray, but I was like, hell with that. These guys are frontline troops. Who cares? They're going red. But the Reavers, which I did paint a bunch of Reavers earlier, I did go back and I painted their shoulders gray. So main project tonight is just trying to get these shoulder pads done so I can at least start working on the pack markings, get these guys close for being table ready. I gotta let these shoulder pads dry. I gotta put a second coat on the white because the white's kind of patchy. White's a pain in the ass of a color, let me tell you. Not a fan. Anybody has the patience to paint white scars or Tau in those all white suits, you have my respect, sir, because yeah, I can't do that. I really wanted to play Tau at one point too, but man, they are just, for me, visually, I can't tell one of their troop choices from another very well. I have to sit there and I gotta have a cheat sheet just to know who my figures are. So yeah, it was funny. He bought all my Elven army, and in the end, I don't think any of us played Warhammer Fantasy again. We were so in love with 40K. So we just played it and played it and played it. I moved out from that roommate's house, and I moved in with some other roommates, and discovered the power of drinking. And I didn't have money for figures almost ever again, probably for a few years. That's the problem. Living with a roommate that loved loud music as much as I did, and given that this was the very early 90s, we were part of rave culture, so we used to just drink way too much and party way too much. Never had any money for minis anymore. So that's what we did. 40K story and how I got into it. So it was funny. We got up for years, and I still have the books. The kids read the stuff here and there. My son really loved it a lot, and he was getting into it. He was role playing a bit, and then earlier this year, I decided, screw it. I love the game. Why am I not playing it? My wife was like, you love it that much. Why aren't you playing it? So I had to agree with her, and I started playing again. It is a different game. Let me tell you, it is not the game it was 20 years ago. I remember seeing Epic when it came out. And you would see these figures of Titans. And I thought it was hilarious because you would see a little tiny packets of little dudes all over the place, little tiny rhinos, and then there'd be a Titan on the table, and it was the size of a regular Space Marine. And we're like, if that's the scale, holy crap! Imagine if they made one of those for 40K. It'd cover up like a quarter of the table. It'd be huge. They couldn't do that. And that Night Apocalypse bug I got sitting behind me is otherwise proof of that. Then you got to get to that too. Yeah, I'm all in on the minis game. A couple of my D&D groups that I was playing in fell apart one right after the other, and I still love D&D. I'm actually playing in a once-a-month game where one of my friends runs 1 month, and then I'm running that zombie apocalypse game I've been building stuff for the alternate month. So I'm still playing D&D, but I don't know. Maybe it's me getting older. Maybe it's because the players I played with. But I'm a little spent. I'm playing traditional D&D. Or I shouldn't say playing it. I'm a little spent on running it. I'm sure a lot of you gamers out there know about the permanent Artemis. I'm sure a lot of you gamers out there know the idea of the permanent GM situation. Unfortunately, that's been my role for most of the last 20 years. I don't actually get to play as a player very much. Most of the time, I'm running. And I will admit, that's one of the things, one of the real draws of 40K. No, it's not a role-playing game. But there's no GM. Players versus players. And we play. And you come in and you play the game. And you can build terrain and you can set things up and you can set a story. Like I'm working on a extended campaign for 40K. Just so you understand, I mean, I have 2 armies of my own. I have my Space Wolves, which I'm painting up now, but I also have a fully painted and ready to go Death Guard army. I mean, I've got pieces of it I'm still working on. I've got this Demon Prince that I've kit bashed for it that I still need to do some work on. But I mean, for the most part, I've got a fully functional, fully formed Death Guard army. Easily 2,500 points of Death Guard. I'm actually playing it in a league right now. But I've got a campaign that I'm putting together for extended story for me and a couple other people I know that play. My wife actually started playing Drukhari. She actually thought it'd be a cool idea for what I had the idea for, to get her used to playing the game. So no pressure, just a fun, casual campaign game with simple scenarios and simple objectives, which is always a great way to get somebody who's interested in the game to play. You set them up with something small, a 500-point army, Kill Team. Kill Team is wonderful. Love Kill Team. Gets people interested in the game in a very small way, but very quickly. But nice thing about Kill Team, you get people into 40K, you get them in the interested. I got my wife interested in Kill Team, playing the Drukhari, and now she's working on a Ynnari army, Drukhari Eldar hybrid. For those of you that don't play 40K, basically a elves and dark elves, or as she calls them, the BDSM bondage elves, because that's what they basically are. But basically bondage elves and regular elves. Hello, Apollo. Who's a good puppy? Yes, I have 2 dogs. This is Apollo. He's a good puppy. And then I have little bitty Artemis. She's not a good puppy. I don't like her. But you heard your name, didn't you? That's a good puppy, Apollo. But I'm painting right now, buddy. Go on. Go on. Go on. Come on. Get out of here. Now, a lot of guys, when they paint the Aquila, or whatever this symbol is, it's on the chest of the Marines, the winged skull, they do it in metallic colors. I do not. At least not for these guys. For my wolves, I paint it in this eggshell off-white. And then I give it a sepia wash to make it look like bone. Now you may notice I'm sometimes a bit messy here. Part of this is because as I've gotten older, I don't have the great eyesight I had as a young man. And birds, because I got big chunky hands and I'm not the most dexterous guy in the world. So I've learned to be patient, to overpaint a little bit, and then go back and sharpen up all my edges. With my mid-tone, which I find is the best way to clean up edges. That's by design. So you think of it as a recipe. If you think about it as a recipe, what I will do is I will undercoat, at least with the ones I use in the 3-coat process. I gotta say, I've really become a fan of the look of the contrast Space Wolves Gray. It's a little lighter than my regular paint job, but it's not really bad. It's not that far off, and I like the way it looks. So these are probably some of the last guys I'm going to do using my 3-step process. So basically for the 3-step process, I give them an undercoat in the fang. And then I will sit down with a Fenrisian gray and rust gray. And off the top of my head, I can never remember which one is the darker one and which one is the lighter one. I have to look at the two side by side. But basically, I take the middle color of the 3, and I then give a pretty heavy coat of it, but only one layer. So I keep it kind of dark, and the real recesses are still kept that fang color. Then I'll take Nuln Oil and I'll take Nuln Oil and I don't want to say I dip wash it, but I think if I could get Nuln Oil at a cheap enough price where I could get like a cup of it at a time, I probably would dip wash them. Instead, I just use a really heavy brush and just give a heavy, heavy wash to the whole figure in Nuln Oil. Making sure it hits all the recesses and darkens the piece on a whole. Yeah, just darkening a hole. And then I'll go in with the lighter of the 2 shades. And I will, again, I don't want to call it a dry brushing because that's not really accurate. Let's just say I take a brush and I guess it is a dry brushing, but wow, it's pretty extensive. And I give it a pretty heavy dry brushing all over the figure, and to get it to the state that you see them here. And then after I've done that, is what you see now, where I'm going back over the details and picking up the individual details and giving them paint. I use the same off-white for doing purity seals, but when I wash them, rather than washing them in a sepia. Is it Seraphim sepia or Seraphim sepia? Rather than washing them in sepia, I wash them in Agrax, and that makes like all the difference in the world. And I know some people, they put the Agrax instead of the Null oil on the Marines. I've seen, like, I know Duncan from Warhammer TV, they actually, in the official paint job, rather than Null oil all over the blue armor, they use Agrax. I'm a big believer in making your paint job your own, finding a paint job you like when you're doing your own guys. I mean, I originally wanted to, I started painting the walls. I'm like, oh, maybe I should do my own paint job and paint my own paint scheme. And I kind of messed with a couple there. I made a few here and there. But in the end, I mean, I do have a custom chapter design. I've just never really bothered to paint more than one figure of it. But that's because, you know, I love my wolves. So I made the wolves my job. So I made their paint job. It's a little different than the book standard one. It's my chapter or my company's worth, whatever you want to call it. Well, I let some stuff dry here. And it's been like an hour. So now we're painting. It's a good night. I might still paint a little more, but I think I'm gonna turn off the camera and do what I do. I don't know if anybody's here, so this will be up here later on. I'm gonna leave it up. Hope you enjoy my musings. It's Big D, and game on.